Hello and welcome everybody at this new edition of our podcast, where we talk with people all around the world who are working for peace. And work for peace you can do in many different capacities, as politician, as activist, but also certainly as a researcher or journalist. And therefore, I'm very happy that today I can talk to Rena Netjes, who is a researcher and has been journalist for a long time in the Middle East. And you have a very extensive work experience, and I think it's better if you introduce a little bit more where you have worked in the Middle East. Can you maybe explain to us a little bit?
Thank you very much, Jacob. Of course, I studied Hebrew and Arabic, and I've been teaching those for many years. I thought I first have to know the language very well before I start to write about the area. I have been studying also in Tel Aviv and in Cairo. I have been working as a journalist in Cairo for many years. Then I had to be back in the Netherlands, and from there I went to visits many times to Israel and Palestinian territories. I've been to Lebanon a few times, and now I currently work for years already on northern Syria.
Yes. So that's you've seen a lot. You know the languages of the Middle East, and of course we are in this podcast interested in understanding conflict and understanding also what's happening in Israel and Gaza, Israel and Palestine, and you've studied it a lot. And I was wondering how did you come to actually get interested in the conflict in Israel Palestine?
Thanks for asking me that. I was born in the east of the Netherlands, not far from the German border. I was raised with all the stories from the war. Grandparents from both sides had saved people, like Jews and resistance fighters. They hid them for the Germans. British pilots needed to be brought back to France. So I was, as a child, I was raised with all these stories and the horrible things that happened in Germany. And my mother was always quoting from priests who were preaching in the east of the Netherlands in the 30s and in Germany, who warned people in the east, the Netherlands, what was going on in Germany already, like in the 30s. So all these signals were there. So then later on in Amsterdam, I heard some elderly people said we did not know. That was new for me to hear, that people would say we did not know what was going on. And then my parents were very active. I don't even know exactly how they got to in the Wiedergutmachung. There were groups of teenagers, Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, Arabs who live inside Israel. They came every year, a big group. They came to Germany, and then they had an extra week or 10 days in the Netherlands. My mother organized everything, trips to the Anne Frank House, to the Hague, the host families. I have to say that sometimes the Palestinians were less welcome, so they all stayed at our place. We had like Jews and Arabs, while some other host families only wanted to have Jews. So you have it already from that time. Anyway, my parents, they opened to host everyone. But having said that, the environment in the east of the Netherlands was, in general, quite pro-Israel. So there I came from. The books of Leon Uris, the Exodus, and so on. That after all the horrible, there are no words to describe what happened in the war, the Holocaust. The Jews needed to have a safe place. Actually, they had to leave Europe to feel safe. So, as a child, my father put a poster of the Hebrew letters on my door, so I was staring at these letters. And when I was 16, my parents had they got 2 free holidays to Haifa and a tour through Israel. And my mother said, Rena, you can go with a friend. But the friend was, of course, not allowed. It was dangerous. And my parents convinced her parents that it was okay. So when I was 16, I was the first time in Israel, and I heard this language with all the im, od. I thought, I'm going to study this. And I was reading also in the weekends, my parents put classical music. I hated it, so I went upstairs with Reader's Digest and the books they had every weekend in a small village in the east of Holland. They had all these American magazines. So I was reading about Hezbollah and everything. So, and I already knew I want to really understand the Middle East. I've been doubting about maybe studying fashion or something, but I chose to learn Hebrew, and then I came at the university. I couldn't do only Hebrew, I had to do Arabic as well. I first didn't like it, but later on I thought, oh, then I have the whole picture in Israel. And it was only through my studies of Arabic and visiting also the West Bank that I started to learn the other side of the story.
But what did you understand before of the conflict that was taking place?
What I first understand very much is, like the ghetto of Warsaw, all the concentration camps, and that the Jews, they fled with boats, also to Cyprus, Nicosia, and then the Brits, Palestine at the time was called it Palestine. There was a British mandate, so the Brits did not want so many Jews to arrive because there was an Arab revolt already had taken place, if I recollect, in 1928 or something around that area, around that time. So the local Arabs were not happy with all these big numbers of Jews, or European Jews arriving. They already had also from Russia pogroms that happened before. The Russian Jews were walking to Israel in several waves of aliyot, as you call it. There were, of course, already these Jewish organizations who were expelling Palestinians and were doing attacks on British officials. The King David explosion, the Irgun, Menachem Begin, killed many Brits as well in Jerusalem. And so there was the whole situation in Palestine was not calm. And I also sometimes wonder how much was known in the West, because we now know it very quickly. But at that time you had no TV and so on. So that was also a question for me. Like Herzl said, there is a country without the people for a people without country. Was he genuine or did he know better? That was always my question. Now I know that he knew because he has visited the place. But until now, I see so many people in the Netherlands, believing all these stories.
Yeah, let's talk about that. But actually, you can say your interest in the conflict in Israel-Palestine sort of brought you on the idea to start studying the languages of the Middle East. Is that true?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what happened when you started studying Arabic?
I liked it very much, and we went to Egypt, and actually, we went also. I went with, and maybe it's a nice anecdote. We woke up at 6 o'clock or something with my friend to have breakfast with her, and then we went to sleep another 1-2 hours, and then we woke up, and then she had gone to work. But then the mother said, you cannot leave the house. You have to have breakfast. And then I didn't know any Hebrew yet, but I knew in Arabic we ate. So I told her we ate in Arabic, and then she understood because she was a Jew originally from Iraq. So she also knew Arabic. So I could get along with the Arabic also in Israel because many Jews just came from Arabic countries. So it helped me also to, and say, okay, you already ate? Okay, you can go, guys. So, so this is how you also learn, of course, how everything works.
Yeah. And so how did first you had this idea of Israel as a safe haven for Jewish people who are persecuted in Europe and Russia, etc. And what happened that that changed your perspective on the conflict?
I asked, for example, when I was a teenager, I asked Jewish teenagers friends, one friend in particular I have in mind, why don't you speak with the Palestinians? And she said, talk with the Palestinians. They are dogs. You cannot speak with dogs. This mentality, and we're talking about many years ago. So, and I have seen this over like 3 decades getting worse and worse and worse. And when you go to the West Bank, you realize that many people in Israel, although the West Bank is so nearby, have no idea what's going on there. It's not in Israeli media. So it's two different worlds so near to each other. But let me also give an example that's maybe even closer. I was studying half year at Tel Aviv University. My idea was to go live in Israel, but to that extent, I also love the weather. It's the weather, the food, and everything. I think Holland's very cool. And then I was doing some Arabic literature, Palestinian literature about the stone. There were poems about stone. It was the time of Intifada and so on. And there were Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis in the same class. But in the break, they always separated in two groups. And I was one day sitting with one group and the other day sitting with another group. They were never sitting together, So this also already, as a 22-year-old,
This was in Tel Aviv.
This was in Tel Aviv, not even Jerusalem. I chose Tel Aviv. I didn't want to go to Jerusalem because I know in Jerusalem there's more like, at least Tel Aviv University was quite leftist. Merit, yeah. So, but also less now, I think, than back then. This was at Tel Aviv University, and then one of the Palestinian ladies invited me to her home with her family. We watched was the first opening, I think it was in Madrid, the first preparation of the Oslo talks, the Oslo agreement. So at that time there was hope. There was really hope. We were glued to the TV. We watched it. But very soon after that, I actually lost hope. And for my part, it was the Israelis really don't want. They don't want to give in anything. If they hand over something to the Palestinians, you can look at the maps. It's land, that has no water, all these kind of details. But you have to dive into all the details to know this. It's just not like half or something, but it also depends which kind of land. Do you give fertile land or do you give a part of the desert? And still, I also see many people tweeting in the Netherlands like the Palestinians never accepted like the half. Okay, there is two things, it's why would they, when they don't have our Bible, and they don't, many of them at least, the Muslims don't have what we have, like this is the promised land. Okay, so why should they end up giving their land from their ancestors, where they farmers, to somebody who claims that this is my promised land? That's one thing. But even if you look at it, the Palestinians were with like 2.2 times more than the Jews in 47. And these things I only learned at Tel Aviv University. In Holland, I had never heard it. In Tel Aviv University, they had all the statistics from back then, how many Palestinians were living and where and how, and all the massacres that happened. I had never heard of it in the Netherlands.
Do you think it's still taught like that in Tel Aviv, or has it changed?
I think it's still taught. The same professors are still there. I think it's still taught, to be honest, but it's less people maybe interested or think there should be consequences out of it. But I think it's still taught. Actually, I find many Jewish scholars way more interesting to follow and to read than many in the West, because they really have in-depth knowledge and files.
Can you name some who are worth following?
Ruben, what's his second name? I can tag them under the
Yeah.
like Ruben, and of course Benny Morris, and a writer. Don't know if it's still like I have to say. My professor was Eddie Poudet. I don't know if he's on Twitter, but his books are really, really very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We can tag them under the video.
Yeah.
What I was wondering, like, so you had this experience in Tel Aviv, and you saw what life was like, and you were surprised by certain facts that, you know, Palestinians and Israelis live so close together. But actually in the news, Palestinians seem not to exist in Israel for a large part, even though the West Bank is very close to Jerusalem, etc. So what else do you think do we not know from here, like from the Netherlands? What are the most important facts about this conflict that people don't know or do not want to know, maybe in the Netherlands, about Israel or about this conflict? What should we know actually in order to understand this conflict? What you think is sort of doesn't get enough attention in Dutch media?
What I learned from Professor Baudet, and I have a reader, but it's in Amsterdam, 1,000 pages. That was like my treasure. I will consider that my treasure, with all the documents, all these in-depth documents. But after studying this for half a year full time, I came to the conclusion it's really started with what's not so much known in the Netherlands, with the Brits promising this land with fake borders, vague, not specified, to both 1917. Everybody knows Balfour Declaration, but what people do not know, well, and I learned it only in Tel Aviv University, that before that, in 1915, 1916, the British High Commissioner in Cairo, McMahon, he promised that Palestine would be given to the Arabs in return of the Arabs helping the British against the Ottomans in World War I, because the Ottomans were allied with Germany. And but then the Arabs were with empty-handed. Were with empty hands. It didn't happen. So the Brits promised it to Chaim Weizmann through the Balfour Declaration, number one, and then in Europe, and then in the Middle East, they promised that Palestine would be, given to the Arabs at the same time. So this is the core. This is the core of what happened. I think this is the main takeaway. But of course, also everyday life. Talking about everyday life in 2015, when I was there, I was visiting. What's his name? A leader of these Kairos documented Palestinian churches, and he got a call, like a Christian farmer called him, that now they will
From the Tent of Nations or not?
What?
Is this from the Tent of Nations or not?
This I don't know, but it's a Kairos document.
Kairos documents. Yeah.
And then I went there and I documented all this, that the farmers' land was taken, and he can go protest in an Israeli court, and sometimes then it's delayed, or sometimes maybe they got things back, but overall the situation getting worse and worse and worse. Land is just being stolen from them now.
So you have been witness to a moment where land was being stolen.
Yeah. That was 2015, just outside Beit Jala, the West Bank. Yes. And I think in general, of course, journalists, several journalists will know, because I think overall Dutch media is quite doing well on this conflict. I think I'm not in the Netherlands, so I don't know in detail, but compared to, for example, German media, it's a big difference. I would say what I would see, but all these details, and I was also before that I was with an Arab Dutch and in 2 weeks in Israel, and when we left, the Israeli Mossad guy on Ben Gurion was shaking, and in Hebrew he said, "There is a name lookalike. There is a name lookalike," and they thought we were Al Qaeda. So at that time, I understood everything in Hebrew. I said, "You are kidding me. This guy is detained in the US. Just Google and you find it." But it was horrible. We went to investigations, and it was really horrible until after 2 hours or something, the plane was delayed. Our luggage didn't go with the plane. A higher ranked Mossad officer apologized. But this is how it goes. Huh? When I saw the article of 972 yesterday, they already suspect people with the same names or with the name lookalike, even if it's not the same name, but lookalike. Well, you have many people in the Arab world with names that look alike, with Yusuf or Muhammad or whatever. So then basically everybody becomes a suspect. What I also wanted to say earlier, Israeli media, when I studied in Israel, was more portraying Palestinians like, oh, they're all the enemies. And I hear this in Christian churches in the Netherlands too, and Palestinians are the enemies. I've heard that in Zwolle. That's why I don't go to. I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church anymore because I really don't want that. To hear that. I'm probably not in all churches, but I've heard it. So like really portraying, like dehumanizing. And I think, of course, it helps a lot when you know Arabic. You talk with people and you see that they basically want the same as we, just life. They are ambitious to study, and it's not that they sit the whole day and are against us or so. The opposite.
Yeah. So you mentioned a while ago, at some point you came to the conclusion that the Israelis are not interested in peace, and are actually have never really wanted to live together as equals with Palestinians. Is that so?
They just there is this part who now are in charge, this part of Zionist fanatic and often Orthodox, not only I think, but they want it all. With the Bible in hand, they want it all, and then you have in the West too many who at least don't block them. And this is where we are, and so many Western politicians. I always thought if you have a child, you would never spoil them, because then the child becomes terrible. This is what happened with Israel. Of course, they suffered so much, but it does not mean that you now have to let Palestinians pay the price. And the West was okay with it.
So we have this, let's say, spoiled child that gets everything what it wants, and it seems true. Also now, it seems that Netanyahu has more leverage over U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Israel than Biden himself, if I may say so. But how to explain the fact that it came so far, that there's actually that it seems that we are also the Netherlands. I find it very striking that we seem to act like we are powerless. We can't do anything. We see what's happening, and we cry sometimes fake tears about Palestinians, but there's not a moment that we can say, okay, now it's enough. Now, okay, you've done enough horrible things. Let's engage in some action. How come that it is so we are so paralyzed in the West in order to, I mean, we act tough. Sorry if I'm talking so long, but it's just really striking. I think a couple of days ago, yesterday, both the king, our king of the Netherlands, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs made a statement, saying that actually, the right things about, crimes, international crimes should be prosecuted, la 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 la, and it was about Russia in Ukraine. So they had the good story, it was about human rights, and it was about values, and it was about that crimes should not go unpunished and those kind of things. And we can say that about Russia. Why can't we say that? Well, it's, I think, much more obvious in your face, the crimes in Gaza. Why can't we say such a thing about Israel?
I think there is several things. Maybe the disbelief. We all come from this northwestern part of Europe where horrible things against Jews happened, and there's still a lot of anti-Semitism, of course. That we treat Israel, like in a different way, and of course, I think our Prime Minister Rutte, he wants to become NATO. He wants to have the NATO top job, and for that part, he can't go against U.S. politics on Israel. That also plays a part. He intervened in the vote, in the UN vote, several weeks or maybe a couple of months now ago, to be aligned, quite aligned at least with the US in this. And maybe, I remember myself when I did not know Arabic. I also looked at the Palestinians differently. When I knew only Hebrew, I had only, basically a lot of contacts with Jewish Israelis, then you somehow look at the Palestinians as they are the enemies. You have to break that barrier and to know people personally, probably to make this shift, and the shift also goes gradually. I think in the end, the younger generations in the West have made this shift, or for a big part, and then I find it even more in the US than maybe in the Netherlands. I'm not 100%, but I feel like the US is even far further now than for example, Germany or the Netherlands. But and there's also something else. Democracy, politicians, they have only 4 years. They don't have a long-term strategy, because I think this whole conflict, in short, will set us back 100 years of instability in the Middle East. I think what I understand, I did not really dive into this, but what I understand from others, that many of the current Hamas fighters are orphans. The parents have been killed by Israel in previous conflicts. So imagine what a huge volume extremists can tap into. People want to take revenge. I think of myself, when somebody would take my house in Amsterdam or my office, I would start like really a fight. I will not just let that happen, And imagine if you lose then also relatives and also, So I don't get it that many Western politicians don't get that.
No.
This will make also, let's take it from this angle. This will, I believe, also make Israel more unsafe. Maybe short-term gain, but it was an Israeli government that put PLO fighters, when the PLO had not yet signed peace contract, in southern Lebanon, and many Palestinian refugees were there. And then Hezbollah adopted the whole idea of Palestine. It wasn't before. It was because of all these fighters were put. Jessica Stern describes that in her book. That these fighters were thrown over the border, and that's why Egypt closes the border, because Netanyahu wants the same to do with Egypt. Put these Hamas fighters in Egypt, and then Egypt is afraid to become like Lebanon, that once in a while Israel is going to bomb the hell out of the area and cause many instability. Next to the fact that Sisi hates the Muslim Brothers, and Hamas is of course the radicalized Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brothers.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also of course believe that Hamas is a very dangerous group. But the root causes, we didn't have Hamas until 82 or something. The root cause is, of course, that Palestinians have no freedom, no own state. That's the root cause. as long as those are not really addressed, and not only by talk, but really addressed,
Mhm.
it will not improve.
So the point that you're making is that actually all the violence that is committed in order to sort of suppress resistance against Israel is in fact in the long run always increasing the resistance against Israel. So you say it has both Hezbollah and Hamas wouldn't have been so antagonistic, or wouldn't maybe haven't existed so much if Israel didn't use so much violence against Arabs in the region. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if we look at that and see this extreme form of violence now in Gaza, what is your expectation that will happen as a repercussion in the long
I
run?
think things will take time because many young people will survive this. Young kids, it will take like maybe many years. But um, if no Palestinian state is being established, and I don't see it happen with this government in Israel at all,
Hmm.
and this is then the outlook. It's of course nobody can predict the future, but I think many fighters, resistance fighters, will come up. We are putting the seeds of a lot of
Hmm.
people who want to take revenge, and I would say in a way quite rightly so. If I had lost everything,
Hmm. This kind of, yeah. And if we look wider than just the people in Gaza, what kind of repercussions will it have in the region? If you look to Syria, where you've been studying this a lot, can you explain the implications of what's happening now for what's happening in Syria at the moment?
yeah, and then thank you for asking me that. And then I like to go back a few years, like in Syria. There's also something. The Israelis prefer Assad to um, to stay in power, which is a cruel dictator who killed at least a few 100,000, maybe even up to, the UN stopped counting at 500,000 in 2014, 2015. And it's still going on every day, by the way. Although on a less intensive, but he's still bombing decision areas. Um, um, I talked with former US ambassadors about this, but really that Israel wanted Assad to stay was really a big point for the Americans to not have him removed. And now Syria is still very unstable. I mean, half of the country already left, and the flight is still going on. But let me jump to 2018. There was an opposition area in the north and in the south still. And then it was Netanyahu, Putin, and the Emirates who decided the Emirates was paying the salaries of the opposition fighters to let the southern front collapse. Russia would take over the area and promised to Netanyahu that Iran would not take over. But of course, Putin cannot be trusted. Putin, at a certain point, needs his troops in Ukraine, and now Iran and Hezbollah is at the borders of the Golan. They are intensifying their tunnel network. And now the U.S. improved, I think it was yesterday or the day before, millions to destroy this tunnel network. So it's it's also a circle of amateurish decisions, wrong decisions that make things worse. And again, this was Netanyahu. And Hezbollah is expanding also in northeast Syria under Kamisle, where this YPG fighters, this Kurdish, but many come from other countries than Syria, and it's basically the PKK branch, which comes from Turkey. They a part of this PKK and this YPG branch has also close ties with Hezbollah. In the past, they have been training with Hezbollah in the Bekaa Valley, Öcalan, training camps in Lebanon, in Hezbollah area, and in southern Syria under Hafiz al-Assad. Then he was, of course, removed out of Syria. Turkey threatened to go in to take him, and then he was caught. But these YPG, they fight against ISIS very much, as well as, by the way, also fighting against ISIS. But that does not mean that they themselves are not doing very bad things. And in short, in Northeast Syria, what people don't know, and many people don't know in the West, Hezbollah has already 13 bases in Kamista, and is gathering information about American troops over there, and then we have contacts inside bases.
So what these bases are? Whose bases for Hezbollah or who?
Hezbollah funded, Hezbollah led, and they recruit locals. They recruit locals.
But
locals
under the flag of Hezbollah or under the flag of something else?
In Kamisle is under the flag of Hezbollah, but they are part of the resistance, the acts of resistance with the Islamic resistance of Iraq. They work with the Iranians, with the Iraqis. Iran has a base in Hasaka, which is 50 kilometers more south. And together they collect information about American troops. They send it to another center more south, and from there this attacks on this Tanf base, base
in the south.
In the south, that was in Jordan. This Tower 22 attack. From there, these rockets are fired. The thing is, when Americans retaliated, they warned the Iraqis, so the Iraqis warned all their people, so the big guys all left their bases and hid in villages. So the only ones who were killed were some poor guards, some poor local guards. But of course, the weapon depots were quite destroyed. But this happens, Israel is doing this in Damascus for years. What the Iranians counted, even if 70% of the weapons are destroyed, we will bring new ones, and in the end, the network is growing.
Of course.
And they take it, okay, so Israel destroys with that.
But it's quite confusing for an outsider to know what's going on actually in Syria now, I have to say. But you are saying that Hezbollah, of course, is part of this sort of resistance network. No, it's that you have in Iraq, and you have in Syria, you have in Iran, you have maybe also Houthis are aligned, Hamas is aligned somehow. So this, but you're saying that Hezbollah is also working with YPG.
Yeah,
but that is very confusing to me, because it seems that YPG is, of course, working with the Americans a lot in order to,
exactly. That's what we're saying. And this is not completely new, because in West Euphrates, and I started to work on northern Syria since 2016. In West Euphrates, YPG helped the Assad regime to regain eastern Aleppo, and they cut the roads which provide food and weapons to the opposition fighters. They cut it for the Assad regime, so they work with the Assad regime in Aleppo. This YPG is where I have been focused on for many years, because Kurt's telling me stuff, saying exactly what you were saying. I'm surprised, so that's why I thought it needs really be investigated. Assad gave Kurdish majority and Kurdish minority areas in 2012 to YPG. So the YPG would crush the revolution among Syrian Kurds. Syrian Kurds in majority are against the Assad regime. YPG is not. They are doing Assad's work to crush it. You don't see pro-revolution demonstrations in Kamisle and northeast Syria. You see them in opposition areas, but not in the areas of the self-administration. A little bit among Arab areas, because there they don't have the iron fist as they have in the north and Kurdish areas. But Assad, I talked with people who were in those positions who had to do this. Assad regime gave police officers with weapons, with cars, border posts. He handed it over to YPG in 2012. They are kind of an ally. They write in the Washington Post that they are Americans' most loyal ally. Yes, they're very much against ISIS, as also Syrian opposition is, by the way. But on the same time, especially in West Euphrates, they work with the Russians. They are very close with the Russians. They took the town, Rafat, from the Russians. They expelled all the Arabs, and this led to, because they were on the march to expel more Arabs from more towns, this led to Afrin. And this part, what happened before Afrin, you don't hear it in Western media.
No.
And actually, I heard it when I go inside Syria. I sit with all these people and hear the stories, and then they said, "Yeah, why?" And then I visit these camps. All these tens of thousands of the Rafah area, tens of thousands of people are being expelled by YPG, and actually, that in 2016, when I was at the border, the
Is
first
this a
time,
sort of ethnic cleansing campaign then, or is it non-Kurdish people being
yeah,
expelled?
that's on lawyers to decide, but all the Arabs had to leave, and also all the villages, and
I think
corpses of
Amnesty wrote a report about it, no?
yeah. Also, and it also happened in the east. Amnesty wrote a report about Tel Barak and in the east. Yeah, this is very detailed. But Afrin, which also the brigades, and especially some brigades, also commit a lot of crimes against Kurds. But the basic thing is also that this was a reaction. There was a reaction, and the brigades who commit these crimes are mostly brigades from other parts of Syria who have been expelled themselves. Like, we lost our house in Deir Zor by YPG, though we take a new house in Afrin, which is wrong. But this is also going on. There's many layers. It's not all that black and white, yeah.
So going back to these groups and these resistance, what does it look like in your perspective? How do they work together, and what's their do they have really a common goal, and how will it affect Israel in the long run? Because you already see now, of course, the Red Sea blockade by the Houthis.
Yeah.
You see occasional attacks, even I think from Iraq to Haifa. I've heard that. I don't know if it's true. We know of these, of course, Hezbollah there's a regular fire exchange on the border of Lebanon. So, what is your expectation? How will this develop?
Yeah, what I understand from Americans, the Israelis, of course, ask for years, of course, come and join us to fight Iran. The Israelis would need the Americans. The Americans don't want that. You can see a big difference between the Israelis struck this consulate in Damascus, who killed the top Iranian responsible for transferring weapons to Lebanon, the one who was responsible for Lebanon and Syria, and they killed some more. So there was like a Soleimani kind of attack, like really big attack. When Americans retaliated, they give a warning. So all these high-profile guys were not at their base, So this is the difference. You can see the difference between the Americans and the Israelis. I understand that the Israelis informed the Americans when the planes were already in the air, something like this, like very last moment. And now, what is Iran going to do? I still would think that Iran does not want a full-blown war, because that will be suicide, I think. But they are, they have a long breath. They will keep going on, bringing more weapons, and be annoying, the annoying factor in doing attacks for the time to come. And yeah, I don't know how they're going to retaliate for this one, but it looks like the Israeli war cabinet, or some Israeli leaders really want a war with Hezbollah. They really do everything that it will happen.
It's super that this attack on these generals in the Iranian embassy in Damascus is of course an extreme provocation, you would say, and in any other situation between two countries, this will of course be retaliated somehow. So why do you think Israel wants to escalate towards Hezbollah and Iran?
That's a good question. That I think there are different reasons. And Netanyahu, when the war will stop, he will, when he's not a prime minister anymore, he will have a real problem because of all the court cases. And then you have some other fanatics in his cabinet who want Armageddon, who want full-blown war. Let's take the opportunity and grasp as much as we can. I think Israeli journalists will know this more in detail, but this is what it looks like. That they're really, and they have been saying this in Israeli media also, that we will go to Lebanon after this, after Gaza. So
would can Israel survive that in your perspective, such an Armageddon-like war?
no, they need the support from the US. Cannot. That's why the US is stopping Israel from going to southern Lebanon, because they think the Israelis, you see how the operation in Gaza, how long it takes, and how many months, and we're not done yet.
No.
I mean, and they destroy the whole area and everything that's happening there. So to start with Lebanon, then you activate all these Hezbollah cells in Lebanon. And what I understand from Lebanese journalists, that Hezbollah now also has locally made weapons, rockets, not only from Iran, but they make them locally.
Yeah.
And they have some that can reach very far in Israel, not the majority. You activate also all Hezbollah in Syria. There's quite a lot of Hezbollah in Syria. They're all over the place, only not in the very north, in the opposition areas where I go to now. They're fighting Hezbollah, by the way. But and they capture sometimes some Iranians. You have Iran now in Tel Rafah, which is only like 20 kilometers from the Turkish border. I saw 1.5 years ago, I saw from the front line, I saw the tower where they have the Iranian flag. I could not see the Iranian flag 2 kilometers away. I could see this very high tower. So, it's really not far away from the Turkish border where Iran is now. With all the smuggling activities, with all the drugs, the narcos, Hezbollah is very much engaged in that. The Jordanians regret that, that the southern front has collapsed, of course, because they have a lot of trouble. Also, I saw it a few days ago that that the resistance axis, they try to reach the West Bank from Iraq, and then they have to go through Jordan and from southern Syria. So this is another thing to watch. That they announced that they will do that. That they will set up cells in Jordan and the West Bank. So this will take time, but you might see them emerging there as well. And Jordan is not a very strong state as well.
So how big is the chance of this Gaza destruction eventually evolving into a full-blown regional war in your mind?
I would still think not a full-blown regional war, but also no peace, a lot of unrest, a lot of
so low
attacks,
intensity
terrorist attacks, and so on. So no rest. Like with the Abraham Accords, I saw also like the Christian Union, Gert-Jan Segers, for example, like tweeting like now there is peace in the Middle East. But if you make peace with the Emirates and you ignore the main obstacles for peace, ignore human rights, if you keep suppressing people, then it blows in your face. And this is what we're seeing. You have to address the rights not only of one people, but another one as well. You have to address these grievances. And the West is not very good in it, unfortunately. And also
or not good in it, or no real will to do it, it seems.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious. Everyone knows that if you want peace, you need to involve all the actors that can possibly spoil the peace, no? And we refuse to do that, I think.
Yeah, and we refuse to put a fist on the table with Israel. Now it's enough. You see a little bit swift with the Americans, but at the same time they send a lot of weapons.
Exactly. So in your mind, like I always want to look for some kind of bright lights, and also look for some hope, and also some inspiration on what to do. And what is your? I presume you think a lot about that as well, and you told me that it was one of your wish to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that pushed you to study at some point Arabic, etc. So yeah, we know that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is maybe synonym for, let's say, an unsolvable problem somehow. But let's still look at what needs to be done. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, it pushed me to study Hebrew and Arabic was together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it's hopeful to see also many voices in Israel who don't agree with that, or at least, you know, a minority. It's many, but of course still a small minority. But I would think that if the US is not putting a real red line, then unfortunately, I don't see the Israelis stopping by themselves. It seems like the whole country is now such in a mood of going on and revenge and everything. That yeah, we're looking at the U.S., but we're all, of course, we're also disappointed because we thought that Western countries would learn something from history, that at least we would do things better, and that is, of course, that hope. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I feel like I live in the 30s, like in the Netherlands, with the extreme right gaining power, and we live in the Middle Ages, or in biblical times, even in the Middle East. Like nothing changed. It's going on for centuries like this, and our century is not better, unfortunately. For us maybe, because we keep the conflict outside, but. But eventually it might also harm us, for certain reasons.
How will it harm us, you think?
Economically, but also there might be terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
Like what I also did not hear much in the Netherlands, but the whole 9/11 was horrible, was a result of what the Americans are doing in the Middle East. That's what Osama bin Laden made always clear. I didn't hear it in Dutch media at the time at all.
No, no.
Because many experts talk who don't follow this this Arabic and this Arabic.
It's always very remarkable in Dutch media, Western media, that when a big event happens, you never hear about the context and the background and how did it come as so far, but we hear a lot of how we should start revenge or those kind of things. You never sort of get to understand how it came that Hamas attacked on 7 October, or you mentioned 9/11, or well, there's many. Like these things seem to happen out of thin air. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and then you have this consequence that I heard a politician who is now with the party of Omtzigt. I know him from the Christian Democratic Party. He was always saying Islam is the same as violence. You know, Islam is violence. But then I'm thinking, like, you have this one Jewish state, and very unfortunately, this is not a state. This is not an example, for the rest of the world. And I remember, I don't know him literally, but the leader of the Warsaw ghetto also felt very ashamed. This was already many years ago, maybe already 10 years ago, that he said in an interview that he felt very ashamed of what current Israel is doing, and that's not even now. That was already 10 years ago. What I cannot understand is that we're so much focused on rights for one group, which is very good, by the way. But I would say the lesson of the Holocaust is that it applies for all groups. Because if you have it applied only for one group, then basically you're okaying violence to another one, or people can interpret it like this, or
yeah, exactly. And but let's say still, like, if there is hope, where is it for you with regards to the conflict in
yeah, it's not an
Israel?
easy one, because I also have to keep hope myself. But I sense that worldwide there is quite a community, all kind of countries, and I see some people treating it the global south, but I see it also in Western countries, of course, that denounce this, and they want state. And like Spain and also Belgium and Ireland are at least countries that say it like this. But I think it really is not solving anything if you don't say it like it is. You have to say the difficult things. With any relationship with the human being, if you just allow somebody to do or say very bad things and you don't say anything about it, that's not even being a friend, right?
Yeah.
You should be more honest. And now with all this violence going on and with all these children being starved, it's horrible. I'm not so hopeful that Gaza. I don't. It needs a lot of international power to have Gaza really rebuilt, because I'm afraid that the Israelis will destroy it like this. That's really becoming hard.
So what should the Netherlands do or other Western countries? What should be the good reaction?
At least don't send weapons. If all the reports that's coming out that that when commanders fire, and this last report ISB used that commanders fire at information given by a machine. They don't check it in real time on the ground for themselves. So sometimes like 100 civilians die when they want to target one commander, or they target name lookalikes, or which sounds familiar for me because we had this experience. Some basic, just apply some. It's not so difficult. Just apply some basic human rights standards that you apply to other countries as well. It's a bit crazy to have somebody convince the Netherlands for stealing something in the supermarket or something, but sending weapons to somebody who's killing many people. That I never can combine these things.
No. All right, Rena. Thank you very much. I think our time is up now. Thank you very much for sharing your point of view and your experience. It's not a very. It's quite a gloomy picture of the Middle East that you paint, and there's lots of. There's no real end in sight, as you told us, and there's maybe even much more instability to come if you see what kind of forces are active in and around Israel and Palestine. So, well, thanks a lot for sharing your experience and expertise. It is really insightful. Is there something you would like to leave us with to close off?
Yeah, I was just thinking, we don't want migrants, we don't want refugees in Europe, but the policy we're doing is creating more refugees. So that's also something unbelievable. But as I said before, it's the community of the human rights family, that gives us hope. We see many voices, people who are speaking up against it. That's the hopeful thing.
Thank you very much. And you're one of them, and it's always very good. We cannot solve conflicts without understanding what's going on. So it's very good that people like you go to the ground and understand and speak the local languages, speak to ordinary people about how they see these things. And thank you very much for your work and for enlightening us on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye-bye.